around the same time, while we were still working on the flick, there was a dude named Mark Steven Johnson who's directing the Daredevil movie. And I had, he'd been hanging around the set while we were shooting the movie. I met him through this other guy, Jim McLaughlin. He said, who do you think could play Daredevil? And I said, Affleck, because that's my answer for everything. Like, I just think Affleck could play. I'm a big fan, so I think he can play anything. People are like, Jaws 5. I'm like, Affleck. Affleck plays the fucking shark.
In 2000, X-Men was released to massive critical acclaim and a great box office intake. This immediately led to the Spider-Man franchise and more X-Men films, and basically a bunch of crappy Marvel films until Jon Favreau came to do it right. But in the same year he directed Elf, he starred alongside our future Batman and Jimmy Kimmel's life partner, Ben Affleck, in a Daredevil film.
What do I remember about this movie? Well, nothing, because I never saw it. Yeah, my mom basically told me, no, we're not gonna go see that in theaters. It's too dark, it's too scary, it's gonna be too edgy for you to see. Yeah, I guess I was really pushing the limit the year before with Spider-Man's bloody climax, so I didn't really see this movie until years later, and let me just say, the hype did not suffice.
Mark Steven Johnson was hired to direct when it was over at Columbia Pictures. Yeah, just like Spider-Man, this film hopped into nearly every studio's lap, even Disney. Hell, Chris Columbus was attached at one point, just like he was with Spider-Man and Fantastic Four. Originally, 20th Century Fox wanted to make the film, but they let that pass once Marvel was failing in bankruptcy. At one point, New Regency got the rights to create the film, where Mark Steven Johnson, just like at Columbia, had to convince them to hire him. He was a big fan of Daredevil and had an immense vision for the film, and once Spider-Man was a hit, the studio gave him even more money to create the next big live-action franchise, and what we got was an hour-and-a-half Hot Topic commercial.
As you probably know, this is one of those cases where there are two cuts of the film. For me, I watched the director's cut because that's the one Johnson intended for theaters. It was only the studio who made him do some last-minute changes so they could get a PG-13 rating, as well as shorten the runtime and such. So yeah, I watched the director's cut, but I'll be bringing up the theatrical cut every once in a while, even though it manages to somehow be an even lesser film.
The theatrical cut isn't god-awful, but it definitely has an awkward pace with missing plot points. I prefer the director's cut since it feels like a more complete, comprehensible story. In fact, the Blu-ray edition has only ever been released with the director's cut. I actually don't really like it when a Blu-ray only contains one cut and never releases the other, like what they did with Tropic Thunder, but I suppose it's the version I'd be watching anyway.
But just so you know, I will never be releasing the director's cut of this episode, which contains a really fun subplot involving Coolio.
After a pretty promising and interesting opening credits, we see Daredevil hanging from the cathedral, which gives him the perfect opportunity to tell us his life story. I feel beat and drained, like I'm dying, so I'm gonna tell my story really quick. Just let me get my story off my chest. We get a couple cool scenes of him as a child, getting whooped by the youngest soprano, and having a dad who's basically Rocky. Like, literally, he's a boxer, he tracks down people for the mob. Yeah, he's Rocky. The kid becomes blind pretty quick though. Of course it's from toxic waste. Sometimes it makes you super strong, sometimes it makes you deformed, and sometimes it makes you just blind. The kid accepts it pretty quickly too, like it's a normal everyday Monday.
Maddie, I talked to the doctor and...
I'm blind. I know.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I'm blind now, but don't worry, it was just a normal everyday. It was my fault, toxic waste being spilt everywhere. It happens, you know, it happens to the best of us. We got blind. We will try to limit the number of blind jokes for the duration of this video.
One thing I can't accept is that he manages to get all these great martial arts and combat skills, but without training. I get that his other four senses heightened, but how can he just suddenly become a great fighter? Later in the film, he jumps like a dozen stories without breaking a bone.
You're not Superman, you know.
Maybe Stan Lee is his trainer, or maybe it's that great modern music.
Yeah, this movie doesn't have only one or two modern tracks. It literally has tons of songs that comprised an entire album that was inspired by this movie. You know that Evanescence song? It comes from this movie. Yeah, I was surprised too. There's literally 3 music videos on the Blu-ray. I've never seen anything like this.
Wait, is that the evil Cinephile?
I don't work for you no more, Fallon.
That's extra right there. You gotta pay extra for that one.
Honestly, these boxing scenes are filmed pretty well. After Murdoch's father doesn't throw the fight like he's supposed to, he's murdered and left a kiss from a rose, as they pretty much do a shot recreation of Batman Begins.
Except this movie came out before Batman Begins, so I guess Christopher Nolan ripped off Daredevil cinematography?
I like the attention to detail for Matt Murdock's apartment with the dark walls and boring aesthetic, because that's how a blind guy would live. He doesn't care how things look. The filmmakers even took the time to hire famous blind man Tom Sullivan to be a consultant on the film. Now that's dedication.
Except I'm sure you're all waiting for me to talk about the big bat in the room, so here it goes. Ben Affleck.
Ah, Ben, your career is an interesting one. Starting out big with Good Will Hunting, having a number of flops afterward, only to gain a success as a director, then kind of fall back into the puddle, he's definitely had one of the largest number of comebacks for any famous person. As Daredevil, I think the consensus was that he wasn't believable, and he wasn't. Being a famous star at the time, he was maybe too recognizable in the role. The thing is, that was just at the time. He's dramatically changed in the public perception at this point, and this movie was in the time before Jiggly, so maybe the stardom was holding him down, because I think he's okay as Daredevil. I don't really know what's expected of the role, but I definitely buy that he's a boring lawyer from New York, but there's even times where he becomes threatening, and it's effective.
Casada! Time to give the devil his due!
As you know, Matt Murdock becomes Daredevil to kill those who are freed despite being guilty. How does he know they're guilty? Well, he can use his high-quality hearing to hear the people's heartbeats, and he can figure out if they're lying, kind of like a lie detector.
This whole bar scene is done really well, especially in sound design. It definitely achieves what you can imagine a blind person hears. Except, I don't know if I really buy that a bar like this exists in real life. It seems too cartoony and obnoxious to be a real thing. Well, this is where AV Arad comes in. Yeah, he just basically said in the commentary that there are bars like this in Hell's Kitchen. So, yeah, that was it. Cool.
After Daredevil mauls the culprit, there's this reporter, Ben, who's been doing all the investigating on Daredevil.
Wait, just give me 2 minutes, 2 minutes. I'm gonna draw out my name and then they're gonna all know it was me who did it. Just give me 2 minutes. I'm gonna do this real quick. Nope.
Some of the stuff added to the director's cut is great. Before he enters this silence chamber, which in itself is brilliant, we see a dying woman next to him hearing her cries for help, but it's implied that this is happening miles away. It shows the struggle Daredevil must go through to hear everyone's pleas for help, but not being able to save everyone, and this is something that often goes ignored in other superhero films. But there's also some pretty bad stuff, like when he's with this nun, which even the director stated numerous times was meant to mean something larger, but it never came to full fruition. Well, at least he's honest. Then we get the best part of the film, Jon Favreau being Jon Favreau. They even mentioned Fight Club, which this reference wasn't in the theatrical cut because I guess 20th Century Fox didn't realize yet what kind of cult following that film was gonna have.
Every time you disappear and we can't get a hold of you on the phone and I'm there working alone, you come in, you're all cut up.
I'm in the Fight Club. And it's the first rule of Fight Club. Don't talk about Fight Club. So you're not in the Fight Club. You're out of it.
Didn't see the movie. I'm sure it's a funny joke, but I didn't see it.
Let this be a stern warning. Never, and I mean never, date people that you work with. Case in point, Jennifer Garner, can you please stand up?
Jennifer Garner plays Elektra, and yes, Ben Affleck started dating her after this film. Of course, they broke up way later, but maybe that's because he fell for her when she had those green eye contacts in. Her role was probably more publicized than Ben Affleck's. Even the Blu-ray contains only her screen test, because that's why we all came, folks. We wanted to see Jennifer kick ass, and she kind of does. It was so good that I'm sure there were a number of fanboys begging for a spin-off in the same vein as Black Widow.
I wonder if that ever happened. Anyway, I wonder if the director's cut out that stupid scene where they have that random fight on the playground.
Hey, you just met a blind guy and you get followed into the park with all these kids around, and you're just gonna do this intense choreography that would take days of training for even the best stuntmen on the planet to perfect. Johnson even says in the commentary that he knew this scene would get mixed reaction. Then why do it? I get it, defend your vision, but what the hell is the point of this? Fine, they put a lot of time and effort into this, but Jesus, it's still going.
After that, it'd be great if we got something like the most likable man to ever act on screen.
Michael Clarke Duncan as Kingpin, a role that certainly deserved a better movie. He's strong, he's sophisticated, and by far the most believable part of the movie. Every scene in his office breathes of excellent cinema, well done shots, and superb cinematography. Now in this cut, there's an entire subplot involving Coolio and how he was framed for the murder being covered up by the mob, all of which leads back to the Kingpin. Without this, there's never an establishing connection for the Daredevil to be going after the Kingpin. And Coolio is great. I kind of wonder why they cut him out. What, did he refuse to add a song to the already 10 modern tracks that were on the album? That's a really strange way for the studio to retaliate. Of course, we still have Bullseye in the director's cut. He's a villain so terrifying, dogs duck for cover. Everyone's probably split on Colin Farrell as Bullseye, but I think he kind of works as a side villain. It's just too bad that for all this build-up, he gets defeated in a pretty easy way. This is the first movie Colin Farrell was allowed to use his real Irish accent, and his Bullseye scar looks pretty good, like it's the work of Aldo Rain.
Bullseye.
Oh, that's why they call you Bullseye.
There's a pretty beautiful scene between Elektra and Matt, the only time I buy any kind of chemistry. However, in the theatrical cut, instead of Matt ditching her to go fight crime like a true hero, he just ignores the pleas and he goes and has sex with Elektra. Oh, yeah, that's totally heroic. Did you know that this was released by 20th Century They Sewed Deadpool's Mouth Shut Fox? Wait, why is there tons of unopened soccer and basketballs in their office? Basically, Elektra's father used to be involved in Fisk's mob dealings, and while he's grown out of it, they've decided to execute him anyway for having too much knowledge, hence why Bullseye shows up. Of course, they go Harry Osborn on our asses, with Elektra blaming Daredevil for her father's death. Perfect time for more Evanescence.
You better play that at my funeral.
Do you have any intention of owning a handgun, Mr. Jackson?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Can't hit nothing with a handgun. But a shotgun? Now that's a whole different story. Shotgun got buckshot. It's like little
Thank you,
pellets.
that's all.
Damn it, why did they cut this out? Matt goes after someone who lied in court, figuring out they have a pacemaker, which is why his heartbeat was normal. Then Matt smashes his Mercedes to bits. Ah, so that's why the budget jumped from $50 to $70 million. The anatomy of this plot is pretty gray. Then we get Kevin Smith, who wrote the Daredevil comic book that this movie is based upon. Also, it's his fault that Ben Affleck even got the role in the film. When he was asked, he should have said Jason Mewes.
Count the shells, sucker dog!
What is she preparing for, a fight against emo beanbags? She fights Daredevil, and Bullseye shows up as well. A lot of these scenes are pretty cool with really natural looking special effects. They actually shot in LA, so they had to add a ton of backdrops to make it look like New York, and I think it works. Liar! No, I'm not lying. I think the computer graphics mixed really well with the in-camera effects. On the Blu-ray, you can watch how they did all this during the movie with little video pop-ups. It's really cool, actually. Liar! Oh, shut up. I appreciate this film for what it is. It's amazingly mediocre, but it has interesting moments. It just doesn't take any huge chances. Whoa, 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 whoa!
Whoa. Wow. They killed Elektra. I'm sure this is going to put a lot of weight on Matt's shoulders for the rest of the film, or maybe even a potential sequel. I'm sure he'll be broken and can't really handle everything later on. This is going to affect him on a major level.
They only bring it up one more time. But hey, at least they did the fridging way later than usual. There's a double fight, first against Bullseye and then against Fisk. But is it just me, or did the inspiration for Spider-Man 3's Climax come from this? So Daredevil's weakness is the same as Venom's. Well, at least Tom Hardy isn't playing Daredevil in a built-up reboot.
Actually, the Venom trailer looked really confusing with its strange mix of dark tones, ridiculous costumes, and really out-of-nowhere comedy. Kind of like this 2003 Daredevil film, yeah, so what we're hoping with this new Venom movie, I guess, is Daredevil 2003 quality.
I don't really buy that the Kingpin could fight this way against Daredevil. Apparently he's supposed to be fast and tough, but I don't know, he seems a little too big and clunky to be doing any of this. This was based upon Frank Miller's interpretation, so if that tells you anything, it'll be something that's praised, but personally for me, pisses me off because it's being unbelievable and breaking character. Then Daredevil dies. Yeah, he gets killed by Fisk and the movie ends. So, yeah, that's it. That's why we never got a sequel to this.
The film was actually a minor success, making $179 million on the $70 million budget. Not too bad for a February release. But the film didn't really get the best reviews. I think most people had the same opinion, which was meh, mediocre. It wasn't really much to talk about, and since it was released, no one has talked about it. To me, I think the director's cut is a little better than the theatrical cut, but I still find both versions to be very, very boring.
It was released on VHS. Wow, yeah, okay, still kicking around, are ya? It was also on a 2-disc DVD with only the theatrical cut, despite everyone wanting both cuts on one release. The director's cut got released a year later with an in-depth explanation about both cuts titled Giving the Devil His Due. It's a very personal feature about how they all didn't really like the theatrical cut. The 2-disc DVD has music videos, trailers, multi-angle dailies, a great number of features on the comic book itself, and the famous writers. Jennifer Garner's screen test, a feature of Michael Clark Duncan talking about being the Kingpin, and basically explaining why he doesn't buy Ben Affleck as Daredevil.
I haven't seen him in his Daredevil outfit yet. That's what I'm gonna have to get used to, because I think I'm gonna laugh. In fact, I know I'm gonna laugh because he'll have those two little bitty pointy things on his head, so that's gonna make me laugh right there. But to see him in it is just kind of funny, to see him as a superhero, you know, because he's really cool, and I just don't, you know, when I see guys that I know, it's funny when I work with him and say, you're not Superman, you know. For him to be the Daredevil, he's going to really have to bring it today.
There's one of those HBO documentaries, just like the Spider-Man one. It's basic, but it gets the job done. Then there's this other feature-length documentary. This one is a little more detailed, but with all the other features on the Blu-ray, it really does skim across the surface. There's a documentary on Tom Sullivan, still galleries, and a bunch of stuff to play during the movie, like a commentary with Avi Arad and Mark Steven Johnson, factoids that appear as subtitles, and in-movie pop-ups. And yes, you can play them all at once, which is great. The only thing that doesn't make it to the Blu-ray release is the theatrical cut commentary with Avi Arad and Gary Foster, since the Blu-ray has no theatrical cut. So the only way you can see that feature is if you get the 2-disc DVD.
Overall, this Blu-ray is pretty well put together. There's a lot of great special features on it. There's a lot of fun stuff you can play during the movie, a lot of stuff about the comic book. If you're a fan of Marvel, I definitely would pick it up. If you're just a fan of movies, it doesn't really have too much new to say about the filmmaking process. But, you know, I bought it. I think it was good, but I don't really think I'm going to be watching this movie again anytime soon. There's just nothing about it that latches onto me. It's just kind of forgettable. In 2015, they released a Netflix TV show that I find to be the superior version of Daredevil. I'm still not like a huge fan, but the show definitely made the characters more interesting, and it went full force with the darker, more realistic approach. I think it was better than the movie's approach, which was a sloppy mess of darker tones, but also this Hot Topic-like comedy going through it. It just was a weird mess of what the 2000s were like, especially the early 2000s. But yeah, Ben Affleck basically swore off superhero films after this, and he hasn't done another comic book movie since. And because of that, there never was a sequel.
Liar!
No, there wasn't a sequel. Wait, they didn't do a Daredevil 2, did they? I don't think they did.
Liar!
No, they didn't. They didn't do a sequel. I swear to God, they didn't do a Daredevil sequel.
Liar! No. Actually, well, I've never seen it actually, so I don't know. Maybe it's pretty good. Liar.
Thanks for watching the video. A special thanks to Chris and Ryan for supporting me on Patreon. If you'd like to join them in getting exclusive videos and blogs, early access, and even be able to request reviews monthly, then please click on the Patreon link, and thanks for the support.